Hello, class. This is week 2, discussion 2 regarding diversity in rural communities. Um, so, our professor and our textbook stated that we know that diverse matters involve race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and topics as such. But he has asked us to discuss other diverse areas that we could find in rural areas. The ones that I want to bring out and pay particular attention to are socioeconomic status, which I know was mentioned in our textbook, and any readings that we have done on that. Veterans are more prominent in rural areas and is a diverse topic. Immigration is huge, and we learned that Hispanics are often frowned upon and looked down upon in our rural areas because of the immigration status, and everybody's constantly wondering if they are legal or not legal. So they really have a hard time. That could be a policy issue that's discussed, but that's not the one that I want to concentrate on today. The two that I would like to address the most is age, specifically the elderly, and disability. And the reason why I want to touch on these two is because of my own personal experience with my grandparents living in a rural area and not having all of the proper resources that they need to make it in life. So the elderly have a harder time in rural communities. However, you will find them by the droves because that's what they're used to. They're country folk, as they are called, and rightfully so. And those are their homes that they've been in maybe for the majority of their lives, especially older people that have been married for a long time, such as my grandparents. They lived in the same home all of my life and were together for 59 years before one of them passed. So it was an awesome place to be. It was truly in the country, in a rural area. They raised a huge garden. They had woods to go kill squirrels, rabbits, occasionally deer that they would use for food. The owners of their house, they never owned their own house. They paid rent all of these years for a tiny shack. But the owners had cattle, and my grandparents would help with that. And occasionally when they would kill one, they would give them some beef from that. My grandparents were very, very poor. And that is a thing with rural communities, is a lot of the people live in poverty, especially the elderly. So I want to take this hand in hand with the age and the disability because of my grandparents' experience. And of course, being country and rural, I actually call them Mama and Papa. So I'm trying to be a little more professional here by calling them grandparents. But my papa worked very hard in a rock quarry for years and years of his life. And he was stricken with diabetes. And I do believe that a lot of that was because of the foods that he grew up on. They were raised to eat whatever they could grow and then anything else they could afford. And a lot of those foods were just loaded in carbohydrates and fats. And so my papa was obese, but he was a very tall man, 6'4". Well, I consider that very tall. Just broad, big guy. And but he was a very, very hard worker. Was taught to work as a small child. My papa did not get an education. He didn't even make it through second grade, so he could not read. He could not write. But my papa was a strict Baptist preacher, and that's another diverse area in the community is religion. Most rural areas back in the day, especially even growing up in my time, they were definitely Christianity, but they were even more definite than that. They were of the Baptist denomination. A lot of that has changed now, but you'll still find in your more rural areas that you will have a lot of Baptists. You'll have Church of God is pretty prevalent in the rural areas as well. Now it has grown to more modern and a lot of non-denominational churches that are founded on different basis of faith. But anyway, my mama read the Bible to him and he memorized it, and that was how he preached. He would always take his Bible up, open it up, and just amazing of the power and the memorization that he had, that she read to him. Now my mama, she was almost completely full-blooded Cherokee Indian, and so that was a diverse thing in itself. And my papa was like totally Irish, so they got together. He's this big huge man, and my mama was a little short, round, petite Native American Cherokee woman. She was very serious all the time, didn't cut up, just matter of fact and very business oriented. But to my knowledge, she never worked a job. She was always a housewife and rearing children and keeping up with the home and canning and gardening and all the things. So it's pretty interesting that her and my papa got together, and but they had just a home built of love and care and shelter. But going back to about the disability, so my papa was struck with diabetes, and the first thing that it took was his eyesight. So he became disabled pretty quickly. And because of his age at that time was younger, and although he had worked hard all of his life, he had a very hard time of getting on disability. He was turned down multiple times, saying, you still have your hands and your feet, you can walk, so you can work. Not considering one time that he was blind, legally blind. He had a little bit of vision, but not to where he could do the type of work he always did. So it took him forever to be able to draw any kind of money for them, and they had to make a living with children. So he became an auto mechanic and was actually very good at it considering the limited visibility that he had. In later years, he was finally able to get the disability, but the amount was so small. My mama was able to draw a check off of him from working all of those years, but together they barely had enough to pay their expenses. They were very practical people. They didn't have a lot of bills, but what they drew took everything. Because of my papa's health, different things started happening. So medication was very expensive. Yes, they had access to health care. It was decent, but it did not cover medication. And so the bulk of their check would go toward medicines. I can remember so vividly that there was a family friend and church member that had a little store on the side of the road, and he would let my grandparents purchase things on credit for food because they simply didn't have enough, or would have had enough had he not done that. And then when they got their check at the beginning of the month, they paid him off, they paid their bills, and they just really struggled to survive. They had nothing fancy. They were good stewards of their money. They didn't have anything, but they would give everything that they had away to help somebody. And their faith really is what kept them, and they knew that the Lord was who provided and carried them through. So it is hurtful to me that at a young age he couldn't get the disability until much older, and then it was so little. But even after all of that, being disabled, drawing those checks from Social Security, and that was all they had, they went to apply for food stamps and was told they made $10 too much So they couldn't even get extra help. When they finally, much later in years, were approved, it was like for $29. Granted, $29 helped them, but at that time, I think prices had started going up. So it was not really beneficial to them. And so that's the policy that I wanted to discuss as well, is just making sure that our elderly and our disabled get the right resources that they need. I do not think it should be based on their age or even a certain amount of income. If they can be proven out and a doctor will sign off that they are disabled and they cannot work a regular job to provide for their family in those ways, then they need to look at a different set of requirements for those people to be able to get the help. They should have never been turned down for food stamps as well. They should have been able to get the government help that they needed. Now I know that things have changed and time has changed, and I believe now there's a lot of people who get government assistance who probably really don't need it or shouldn't get it. But I try not to judge that, because I know everybody falls upon hard times and we don't know all of their stories and everything. So that's my discussion, and I just really based it on everything of my own personal experience of knowing what happened to my grandparents, and I'm sure it happened to a lot of people in the rural communities. So I hope you enjoyed this post, and again, I took some of the information from our textbook as well, and then just use personal experience. Have a good night. Thank you.